welcome R.G. Hook.
So this is in two parts. This is the first part. It's called the visitation drink. He was waiting for me at my favorite coffee house, a dive in South Austin called Opa's, with its hardwood floors and burgundy walls, wood tables and chairs, 2 to 3 travel books stacked on every top. He was sitting at a table near the exit, his back facing the front door. I recognized his bald head from behind because it was covered with his white baseball cap, and I could visualize the worn blue flap even before seeing it. As I walked up, I saw that he was hunched over his laptop, typing away. I slipped into the wooden chair opposite with a smile, waiting for him to notice that I'd arrived. But of course, he was working, and when his big brain was writing about science, I did not exist. I waited, and waited, and waited. Unbelievable. Doesn't even know I'm here. And my annoyance caused my head to start shaking back and forth. And it was this movement that prompted him to look up. When he sees that it is me, a huge wide smile spreads across his face, those blue hazel eyes sparkling with a knowing. I recognize that smile as the same one he used to greet me when he tricked me into a second date. Cheerful and inviting, with a hint of a twinkle in the eyes, utter happiness emitting from his person the moment our energies touched. Over the years, that smile said, "Hello," as we saw one another across the room, or "Hey, baby cakes," when I would arrive at his house for a weekend. And finally, that smile said, "Hi, babe," every evening when I walked through our front door. I had come to think of it as his rosemary smile, the one he offered at the relief of seeing my face again. When I had walked into that coffee shop, I recognized that I was in a dream state, except normally when I dreamt, people were fuzzy in places confusing, or were unrecognizable from my waking world. When I saw his smile, I also recognized the clarity of his healthy ruggedness on a full face, tanned and clean-shaven. There was no beard to hide his sunken cheeks, his weight normal and not that of an emaciated cancer patient. He was wearing his black fleece zip-up jacket, and underneath a maroon flannel with a white t-shirt at the base. That shirt was only one of 3 flannels that I had not given away, and it hung in my closet next to the black fleece zip-up. The rest of him was clothed in his regular blue jeans and collecting boots. I absorbed every inch, every rich detail, as though seeing him for the first time, and as I did, I locked eyes with his until my smile faded from my face and my eyes widened, astonished, then alarmed. This is a dream. He's still dead, but he's coming to me in a dream. As this realization hit me, the glimmer in his eyes danced with my understanding while my mouth hung open. We sat staring like that for 1 second, maybe 2. The impossible was happening, and I was being offered a chance to ask the question that had been swirling in my head for months, the one that begged for an answer each night as I cried myself to sleep. With a heart pounding so hard it left an echo in my ears, I said, "How are you?" Simple, yet monumental in its query. How are you? How have you been? Is everything okay? Are you all right? Can you come back? Can I go with you? He smiled again, even larger than before. And then he started to talk, his face becoming animated while his hands gesticulated whatever it was he was trying to describe. My eyes were so fixated on his face that it took me a while to figure out that I could not hear him. It was as though the volume in the dream had been muted. I was hesitant to interrupt because he looked so excited to be sharing whatever it was he was saying, but I needed him to know, I can't hear you. I took a deep breath with the intent of letting him know. Then I woke up. My eyes popped open with no sleepiness in them. I was laying in our bed, the morning sun starting to beam in through our window. I said out loud, "You came to me in my dream." And the sound of my voice in the quiet of that morning startled me in its foreignness. I realized then that it had not been me waiting for him all this time, but him waiting for me as he has always done. And even though I couldn't hear, I could see. I could see he was all right. I could see he was safe. I could see that he was happy. He had broken through, traversed a channel he would not have acknowledged was possible when he was alive, reaching me in a tenuous form to show me his unbroken existence remained, even if his broken body did not. So that's part one. And the only reason I didn't write out part two was because I ran out of time. But there was something else that I noticed in the dream when I woke up, and I said in the story that it was boots, but really it was tennis shoes. They were black tennis shoes. And he had this horrible habit of, when he was alive, of putting his feet on the table. And it was something that he did that he also knew that really annoyed me. And I thought it was interesting that he was dead and I was still annoyed with him. But he kept putting his feet up on the table, and I kept, kind of giving him that look and glancing at the shoes. And it happened twice, so that when I woke up, and then later that day of waking up, I remembered those shoes. And I'm like, what were those shoes? He doesn't even own any black tennis shoes. And I looked throughout the entire house, a 4-bedroom house, and I looked in the garage, and I looked in the utility room, and I looked in all the closets and in the hallway. And then I drove over to his office at the university, and they let me in, and I looked in there. And then I came back home, and I looked throughout the house all over again, every closet, every bedroom, and I went back out into the garage where we would normally have our shoes. We would kick them off there before we walked into the utility room. And there was a little corner that we kept our shoes, and I cleared out that entire corner and then individually put everything back, and no shoes. And I was completely convinced that I just hadn't seen them right. Although, waking up that next morning, I had Googled black shoes in a dream, because I was kind of worried. I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Does that mean he's being held down? And it said that someone, if black shoes appear in a dream, that means that person's on an adventure, on a journey. So I'm like, okay, well, that sort of makes sense. And then a couple months later, I received a picture from some of his science friends in Trinidad, which was where I had taken some of his ashes. And in that photo was a picture of those black tennis shoes. And I'm like, what are these shoes? I sent the note to that friend and said, what are these shoes? I've never seen these shoes. These shoes, they showed up in the dream, and I never mentioned it to anyone because I was afraid. And he said, well, those are his collecting shoes. He only wore them when he was collecting. And I said, well, but where are they now? And he said, well, he probably left them, at the last place that he collected, which would have been in Trinidad. So I said, okay. And just assumed that that was the end of, knowing the whereabouts of those shoes. 6 months later, I moved out of that house. And as I was clearing out the garage, I walked into the garage. It was the last place for me to pack up. The whole house had been packed up, and I walked into the garage and looked at the contents and thought, oh my goodness, I have got to pack this garage. And then I happened to look down at the same corner that I had cleared out before, and I started really getting closer and closer because I didn't have my contacts in. And I realized those are the black tennis shoes. And I stood up and said, those were not there before. And it was 10:30 at night, so I turned back around, went into the house, and went right to bed and fell fast asleep. As soon as I woke up the next morning, I immediately went back to the garage. I pulled the Jeep out, and then I turned back around, and I said, those shoes were not there. And they were facing out. And I asked someone what that meant, what the shoes meant facing out. They said that meant that they were ready to go. And I'm like, I think that he's been ready to go, and I think that he was ready for me to go as well. There were more visitation dreams, and that will be another story, but thank you for letting me share this one.